So I've been in the Valley for a long time designing consumer products, and so when I got a chance to talk with this esteemed panel about kind of the intersection of two of my passions, which is consumer products and IoT, I of course said yes. So I'm going to give each of them a chance to talk a little bit about what their company does, because I think that's a very interesting perspective. They have very different backgrounds, and I think it's going to make things pretty fun today. So go ahead, Kurt.
Hi, thanks, Larry. So my name is Kurt Hoppe. I work for LG Electronics. For the last 15 plus years or so, I've been working on with internet-connected devices. Before we called it the Internet of Things. So basically connecting devices together and putting services to consumers over those devices. LG, as you may be aware and may have owned some products in your home, we got 5 different connected products groups: entertainment products like televisions, appliances like your washers or your dryers or your refrigerators, of course smartphones and tablets, and then not as prevalent here in the US are air conditioning and energy solutions like solar panels, air conditioners, and then we also have automobile components. So looking forward to the panel today and talking about how these Internet of Things can be used by consumers globally.
My name is David Moss. You just heard my lightning round demo here. So we build Presence, which turns your spare smartphones and tablets into free Wi-Fi video cameras. But behind Presence, we have the Internet of Everything platform that connects all these types of things together. We are very focused on the user experience and finding the key things that actually resonate with people's lifestyles as a way to move this market forward.
Hi, I'm Monisha Perkash, co-founder and CEO of LUMO BodyTech. We are a wearable technology company, and we use smart sensors and software to help people live healthier lives. We have a few products. One that we recently announced and have had tremendous success around is the LUMO Lift posture and activity tracker. It's worn as a very stylish lapel pin or brooch on your shirt, and it tracks your body's movements to a very high level of accuracy. And when you slouch, the sensor vibrates to remind you to straighten up. It also tracks your steps, calories, and distance traveled, and transmits that information wirelessly to an app on your smartphone. And this is the first of our many products that really differentiate on quality of movements in addition to quantity of movements. I mentioned the LUMO Lift, which we recently announced, and we did a 1-month crowdfunding campaign, and we were able to sell over 16,000 units in that 1 month at over $1.2 million of pre-order revenue. So we think this is a really exciting time to be in the space and to use wearable technologies to solve real problems, for example, those that are related with posture.
All right, Peter.
I'm Peter Hoddie. I'm the Vice President of the Konoma software team at Marvell Semiconductor. Marvell is a company, one of the biggest fabless semiconductor companies on the planet, making chips for just about every major brand you can name. An interesting thing about 15 years ago is Marvell was looking at moving from an analog parts supplier into microprocessors. They made a really amazing bet on the ARM instruction set as the basis for their chips. And now ARM is dominating the world and giving Intel a lot of headaches. About 3 years ago, Marvell acquired my company, Konoma, with kind of a similar idea in mind. Once they've now standardized the instruction set across all the different processors that they make that go into all these great products, there was a need to standardize the application software as well. And so the Konoma software is based on work that my team had done, that allows the same applications to work everywhere. And more importantly than just the same applications working everywhere, the same engineers can work on all these different kinds of products so that those, not only the code that they create, but the skills that they have can be applied to building all the different kinds of Internet of Things devices that are needed out there in the world. And that turns out to be a really important thing as we move forward and the number of devices diversifies.
All right, thank you, Peter. So I'm going to start with a bit of a vision question for you guys, and thinking about kind of the 5 major areas of consumer IoT, and you have obviously the home, you have home automation, you have the car, which is a huge opportunity, smartphone, obviously. You have wearables, which Monisha talked about, and things that are like carryable. So it's not really something you're wearing, and it's not really your smartphone, but it's kind of in between. So if you look at those 5 major categories, where do you ultimately think the biggest opportunity is? So I'll start with Kurt.
Biggest opportunity for entrepreneurs?
For entrepreneurs, yeah.
For entrepreneurs.
It's all about the money.
All right. When we look at those devices, I think smartphone would probably have the biggest opportunity. The number of smartphones per home, the replacement cycle, the existing footprint today, and the fact that it's a multi-purpose device, so it can be connecting to these wearables, a master controller for your smartphone, or smart home, sorry, taking it into your car. So my answer would be smartphone.
All right, thanks. Let's just go down the line.
Sure. Well, you've seen my app presence, and it does take advantage of the smartphone. I think that that's really compelling. And if you look at just iPhones alone, they're being replaced at a rate of 500,000 phones a day that could be reused and recycled. So that's really compelling. But I think the opportunity for entrepreneurs is actually kind of above the layers that you've described. I think that there's a lot of large companies out there that are focused on the connectivity layer right now, the just connecting things and getting things to work. But there's an opportunity inside of this opportunity to build analytics that transforms this raw data into something useful and provides feedback that's relevant to people's lifestyles. So I think that the startup companies that have unique and really compelling analytics that touch people's lives are the ones that have a huge opportunity ahead of them.
Okay. So Peter, you also operate at kind of this platform level, so you guys are really enabling a lot of what these people in the audience are hoping to do.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think the things we've seen is that the nice thing that's really happened is smartphones have become ubiquitous. I think it's really hard for an entrepreneur to break into that space at this point. And so what you can do, though, is take advantage of its presence. I think that's what you're doing with LUMO Lift, for example, right? That product doesn't exist without a smartphone being around at some point in its existence. At Marvell, we've invested a lot in the home. We think there's a huge number of opportunities there. There's literally a massive number of sockets waiting for things to be plugged into. Sure. There's lots of electronics in the home. It's all going to get smarter. Right? And either the companies that have traditionally had those products are going to get smart and evolve, right? Or you're going to see companies like Nest come in and be disruptive. So I think the home is probably, from an entrepreneur's standpoint, the most interesting place right now.
And Monisha, I think you have a very unique perspective on this, obviously, given your company.
Sure, I'm obviously a little biased. But when you think about innovation, there was innovation on the web and then innovation on mobile. We actually think that the body is the next platform for innovation. And what we mean by that is because of sensor-based technologies and very intelligent algorithms and data mining, we have the ability to understand our bodies in ways that we previously couldn't. We have ways that we can track and quantify our bodies and our behaviors and our interactions between our bodies and the environment in ways that we previously couldn't. And that has profound implications for our health, for our productivity, for our performance, to quality of life. And one of the little sayings we have on our team is, we're giving the body a voice. And it's such an exciting time to be in this space because it's the wild, wild west right now in terms of what you can do with wearable technologies and using the body as the next platform for innovation.
Okay, thanks. So that's kind of the grand vision. I think a lot of this resonates in the Valley because a lot of us are early tech adopters and we're all very excited about technology and we're all very close to a Fry's at some point in our life. But there is a bit of a chasm, obviously, between, I think, what we see as the long-term vision and what consumers really want. And I know there was a survey that I think was released yesterday or day before looking at home automation specifically and saying, what do you want? And it isn't all the cool bells and whistles and things that we've talked about. It really is things like, well, I want security in my home. I want to be able to monitor that. So this question is dialing it into kind of right now. So if you look at consumers and their behavior right now, what's getting the most traction? What is really resonating with them? You want to start again, Monisha?
I think products that solve a real problem is where you're going to see the most traction, right? Technology for the sake of technology only goes so far, and there's plenty of early adopters who love the gadgets. But the technologies that will truly be sustainable and part of our everyday mainstream lives are the ones that solve real problems, whether they are security problems or being able to keep track of all of your things problems or health problems. It's got to be technologies that solve real problems that people relate to.
So Kurt, I mean, LG is a huge consumer brand, and so you guys have your finger on the pulse of consumers today, and you've been selling to them for a long time. What are you seeing when they think about automation and IoT?
So I think, interestingly, so these devices have to be, assuming we have the right price point and availability, and people can get their hands on them. I think it needs to be a device that keeps people's attention, and so it's a device that changes. So it's a device that delivers a service that changes. So whether that's a smartphone, your phone calls change every day, your calendar changes every day, your apps that you download from the App Store, you can try them out and delete ones you don't like. Smart TVs are certainly resonating with consumers today. Netflix is nearly ubiquitous. Comcast might disagree, but anyone, the consumer, basically consumer education is complete. 7 out of 10 consumers say that their next television purchase will be a connected TV. Netflix is the killer service today. And again, this is a device that doesn't get boring because the content's changing. So again, maybe not very exciting, but that's those entertainment devices and entertainment services drive a lot of traffic.
Yeah. So David, you had a really interesting perspective on kind of solving pain, right, and dealing with emotions. And
Yeah.
so forth.
I don't think it's good enough to build an Internet of Things that is just designed to optimize an outcome. That's pretty boring. So there's a gentleman at Stanford named Nir Eyal, and he's written a book called Hooked, and it talks about how you form habits. And it all starts with emotions. And specifically, Nir argues it's negative emotions, but I think it's both negative and positive emotions that motivate people to do something. So for example, when you're lonely, you would go on Facebook or check your email. If you're curious, you'd go on Google or Bing and do a search. If you're bored, you go on YouTube. Now there's these emotions that can be picked up by companies who are in this Internet of Things space and targeted with solutions. Like for example, I really care about checking in on my dog while I'm away. I'm actually worried that my dog is getting into trouble. So I can turn to an app like Presence or new technologies that are connected like this and actually resolve that pain. It's kind of like a prescription drug. And if you can own the prescription drug that cures these negative emotions that people have, then you've got the market cornered.
Peter, you had brought something up that I thought was really interesting, an interesting perspective, which was this maker movement, which I think is a totally different way to think about this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's one thing that's going to take off, that people are just dying for a solution. And what they want are, what some of the other panelists have said, they want stuff that works, right? And they want stuff that's relevant to the problems that they have. And the maker movement is a really interesting playground for that, where you have individuals making things that solve real problems in their lives. Right. And in general, they discover shortly thereafter there's a lot of other people who have the same problem and will benefit from that. And so there's, as the cost of tools has come down, as the access to the technology has come down, it's much easier to create these prototypes, to create these devices, to test them and get them out there. And so it's not just the Sonys and Samsungs of the world and Apples now who can innovate on consumer electronics concepts. It's anybody, and then those can scale up. And so I think we're in a very unique time, especially for entrepreneurs, where there's just this evolutionary explosion around Internet of Things, and it's going to settle down. A lot of categories are going to evaporate. Good ideas are going to be combined from a bunch of devices into one successful one. But now is a chance to make an impact and to get out there and explore, and the maker movement is really the breeding ground for that.
So I'm going to move on to kind of an interesting topic, but in kind of the recent few weeks, months, and even pending right now, there's been these massive acquisitions in this space. So if you look at what's happened with Nest and Oculus, and now there are some that even argue that the Beats acquisition that's pending is actually a movement into this space that Apple's getting serious about an auditory kind of input for IoT. What's going on? I mean, what are these big players like Facebook and Google and Apple, what are they up to? Why do they want these companies? Manisha, I don't know if you want to start.
I mean, I think ultimately it's the race to be the Uber platform, right? The platform that all the other Internet of Things devices connect to. And hopefully, the positive side of that might be more standardization. I think one of the challenges of being an entrepreneur in this space today is there are a lot of things in silos, a lot of solutions in silos that don't talk very well to each other. And I think having bigger platforms that we all work off of, and there's just more continuity between the data, and the data can speak to each other better, and the analytics behind the data. So for example, in the health space, you think about all the different devices that are tracking various aspects of your biometrics, but they don't talk to each other, and they don't give a very full story, a full picture of the person. Well, imagine, a standardized platform where if they all could talk to each other, the kinds of deep insights that you could get about one's health.
So David, you had mentioned platforms earlier as well. Do you agree with Monisha that this is a platform play?
I think that the acquisition of these Internet of Things companies by these large, giant companies is a platform play. I don't think that these companies like Google, for example, are looking at this saying, oh, we're going to make a profitable business out of home automation. I think what they're doing is taking their platform and extending it across multiple domains to get in the areas of the people's lives that they want to collect information about. All this digital exhaust that you give off can be used to target advertisements towards you and actually further companies like Google's existing business models. I also think that it demonstrates that large companies are extremely excited about the Internet of Things space. And guess what? There's more than just Google and Apple and Facebook out there. There's large companies like LG, Samsung. There's other internet giants like AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, Cox, Rogers. And then actually we're seeing energy service providers and utilities get into this and want some skin in the game. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for clever startup companies to be acquired by these large types of companies in the future.
So speaking as a large company, Kurt, who do you want to acquire today? But what are you thinking?
So I think I'll disagree on one hand or agree on one hand and disagree on the other. So I guess classic reasons to acquire a company, customer base, whether that's a big customer or 100,000 or 1 million of the right demographic. That's kind of expanding the platform play. Maybe there's some awesome leadership team that has a track record, and you want them inside your big company running the new potentially hottest thing. Or number 3, the technology itself that's been developed. And I think, again, classic innovator's dilemma solution. If a company's big enough and organized enough and say, hey, we want to go set up a shop in Oregon where they're not distracted by the primary business to innovate, that's kind of the Christensen approach. Maybe now with the Internet of Things, with the maker movement, with broadband connectivity, and I heard someone else on a panel say, no crystal ball. This innovation and makers movement, it's going to happen everywhere. And so when the big companies notice there's some cool technology that has those other advantages, that's when they're going to move.
There's a lot of complaints about lack of standardization, and there's so much fragmentation in this space, and we heard it earlier in one of the talks about how hard it is to get the devices to talk to each other. Is there a concern, and Peter, I'm going to direct this at you, is there a concern in starting to lock down into these kind of proprietary systems while we should still be exploring and having a lot of open source kind of efforts and really figuring out what is IoT going to be?
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge, and I think there's conflicting interests. Apple has shown that by having a somewhat closed ecosystem, it's not as closed as I think people believe it is, but somewhat closed, that you can deliver a better user experience and you can make a lot of money doing that, right? And so there's a lot of companies that are in their own ways trying to duplicate that. As consumers, that's a problem because you need interoperability in your home, you need interoperability between your devices, right? If you're going to make a product like LUMO Lift, you need it to work with everybody's phones without having to go and cut deals with 16 different phone manufacturers, right? And so the standards are important, and frankly, when you have this kind of proprietary systems, it's a sign of an immature industry, right? It's all these companies that are trying to make a land grab, that are some cases legitimately innovating on protocols, so that they can accomplish things that this current standards don't let them do. But as industries mature, you start to see standardization set in, and that creates even more opportunities for growth. So I think we're on the early side of that.
So just a couple more questions, because I think we're getting towards the end here. Given this audience as entrepreneurs and developers, and you guys have solved some of these problems, obviously, given what you do, what do you think is the number one biggest challenge that someone entering this space is going to face as an entrepreneur? Kurt, you want to start?
Biggest challenge.
Biggest challenge.
So I think hardware traditionally is hard and expensive, and so software is the kind of easiest path. But I think the challenge is choosing, kind of to build on what Peter said, choosing the right horse. If you have finite resources in your, whether it's hours in your day or developers in your company, who are your target platforms? And so you kind of need to try to allocate those finite resources most responsibly as you can. So if you look at the mobile phones, there's a couple leaders. You're gonna make your choice. Some other fragmented markets, earlier stage, even smart TV that's 3 or 4 years in now, there's still some significant fragmentation. So which TV platform do you choose? So some of the manufacturers, LG included, we're trying to make it easier. We're trying to support, standards organization, Smart TV Alliance, where you could write one app in HTML5 and run across multiple manufacturers' TVs. We've open sourced something about a month or so ago called the Connect SDK. So we're, mobile developers Android or iOS can write one line of code and hit multiple manufacturers' TV screens. So we're trying to make it easier for developers, but I think that's the challenge. Which horse do you pick?
And I want to say, actually, you deserve a lot of credit for that SDK. It looks to be very well done, and the fact that you're not just supporting your own TVs, but a broader target is really impressive, so congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks.
So Monisha, as a startup without the resources that an LG has, you've been through this. So what was your biggest challenge?
What's really hard is when you have hardware and software, it's exponentially harder. It's not twice as hard. And when you have a small team balancing, 5 layers of technology, there's the hardware, the firmware, the algorithms that power our biomechanical model, and then there's the app layer, and then with the app layer you have, iOS and Android and Mac and PC, and then you have the cloud layer. And then on top of that, you have manufacturing and operations and customer support and marketing and business development and fundraising. It's a lot for a small startup to do. And when I commiserate with other startups in the Internet of Things, we often find ourselves wishing that we didn't have to focus as much on solving connectivity issues or battery life issues and focusing more on the data and the data mining and the rich analytics and meaning that we can take from that data. How can we turn that data into actionable feedback so that people can change their lives based on that data? But we don't get to spend as much time on the data and the software layer as we'd like, because we have to make sure that the hardware layer works too. And so it seems like there's redundancies of frustrations that startups experience along those lines, that it doesn't have to be that way. There should be an ecosystem or something that allows us to check off the box on the hardware so that we can focus more on the software.
So Peter, a lot of what you guys do actually tries to address this very issue, right? Your software and your prototyping hardware solutions try to get rid of some of those barriers.
Yeah, it's a very relatable problem. I think a lot of us have been through it. And one of the things at Marvell we're trying to do is provide more kits and less chips. So chips that work together, that have software that's there, power management issues, connectivity, all those things are taken care of. And so the Sonoma framework for applications is what we've built to kind of glue all those pieces together. And we're launching in the fall with a prototyping kit for the makerspace, and in mobile, and looking to expand out from there in the future. But it is an incredibly hard problem. Just to get a device, that's like its battery works for as long as it's supposed to, or even close, that doesn't crash, that connects. And every startup has to write mobile software. They have to write cloud software, and they have to write the device software. And so one of our goals with our SDK is to make sure that you can use same skills in all of those places, so your engineers can move between them as they have to work on different parts of the problem. So there's a bunch of steps to get there, but it's clearly what the industry needs to increase the pace of progress.
Any thoughts on this, David?
Yeah, we're in the first and second innings of the Internet of Things. And as everyone's saying here, the market's completely fragmented, and that is causing problems for entrepreneurs. And it reminds me of, like in the 90s, you had this printer problem, right? You needed to connect your computer to a printer, And you had to get the device drivers, you had to teach your computer how to talk to it, but now it's like exponentially harder. We actually have an infinite number of devices that we need sort of device drivers for, right? To connect to a sort of an infinite number of platform operating systems, and it's just become very complex. So I think that's one of the challenges, but I think for entrepreneurs, the other thing to think about is what are the solutions that are actually going to resonate with people's lifestyles and resonate with people's lives. That's what people need to be focused on. And if you can focus on that and solve a real problem, then nobody really cares about how it connects, as long as you can get that done. And then later we can worry about the interconnection of all of these things to provide a killer solution.
So in a bit of our own little mini lightning round fashion, just to wrap things up, I'd like each one of you to give one piece of advice, the best piece of advice you could have for somebody who's an entrepreneur or a developer who's entering the consumer space, which I think is very different than enterprise IoT. What would you tell them? Kurt, we'll just go down the line.
I'd say get a biz dev guy and make sure they're persistent and go knock on the doors of some of the big companies and go and show your stuff, show your prototype. You know, it needs to be more than a PowerPoint. Show them something real, and you know, if you can do the right kind of deal, you can get global distribution, you can get acquired.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate two of my points, which is focus on something that matters, and then as you're building up the stack, really focus on the analytics, because I really believe that the large companies right now are stuck in the connectivity layer, and it's the analytics that's going to turn this data into gold. So own that.
To entrepreneurs, I would say embrace failure. Fail early and fail often, but always fail forward. And the reason why I say that is by allowing yourself to fail early, by taking risks, you learn a lot, and that saves you more expensive problems down the road, right? So something that we do a lot is we do very low resolution prototypes early on. Sometimes they're not even working. We go to, arts and crafts stores and put together little prototypes of what we have in mind, and we put it out there in front of people, risking looking like fools, which we often do, but then you learn, you get feedback, and you use that feedback to iterate and to make those improvements. And it's far better to learn those things before you've dedicated a lot of time and resources in a direction that ultimately doesn't work.
Yeah, I take a pretty product-centric view of things. I was going to say part of what you did in terms of make sure that the product concept really works, like that it's something that people want and can understand and can relate to, and you got to do that very early. The other piece is make sure it's actually possible to implement it. There's so many entrepreneurs who have really interesting ideas, but they say, oh, we just have to solve these 10 problems that nobody's ever solved before. My general rule of thumb is make sure your product has only one of those, right? That's enough to give you an advantage in the market, and that's hard enough to do. And so those would be the two things.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to give this panel a round of applause. I think it's been fantastic.